Alright, so we're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. Alright. So, hello. It's me again, Mark Painter. And today I go by millions of different names: Mark Ramos, Mark Abraham, Mark Painter. But hi, today I'm going to be talking about one of God's many attributes, his forgiveness. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 through 7. And the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, and forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Now, it's that last part that we're going to be talking about today. Well, I'm going to mess with the camera a little bit so you can see me a little bit better here. All right. So, today we're going to be talking about that last part. God's forgiveness of sin. So, we have a basic idea of what sin is, right? Basically, everything that we humans consider morally wrong, like stealing, murdering, kidnapping, all that. And this has existed since before or around the creation of the earth, when Lucifer was expelled from heaven. Now, there's a part in the Bible that I want to talk about right here in the beginning, Genesis chapter 3. Here, to give some context for the story, God basically, he creates the world, and then he creates humans to take over it, to protect the animals, to give names to them, and to continue expanding, taking care of the garden, continue expanding life and love and peace and fertility throughout the whole earth. But he has one rule for them. There's two trees in the middle of the garden. One is a tree of life, and the other is a tree of knowledge of good and of evil. And God's rule is basically, you see that one tree of knowledge, good and evil, don't eat from that, or else you're gonna die. And this is a pretty basic, simple rule God has given them, Right now we'd be like, oh, yeah, I'd be able to do that. It's just, not eating a fruit. But for Adam and Eve, it was a little bit more of a challenge because they had Satan in the garden. Also, hello, welcome to the one viewer who is watching this live stream. May you have a nice day, morning, night, whatever time it is for you watching. So, basically, Satan comes into the garden in the form of a serpent and starts messing with Adam and Eve's heads, telling them that why should you trust God is basically Satan's temptation, Why should you believe in God? After all, you have no proof that this can kill you. It's just a fruit like any other. And if you eat the fruit, you will become as smart as God, deciding good and evil. And Adam and Eve, unfortunately, fell for this trick. Throughout the entirety of Genesis 1, and Genesis 2, God is deciding what's good, what's bad. Light's good, plants, land is good. Man not being alone is not good. Man being alone is not good. However, man and woman being together is very good, as said in Genesis 1. But here, Eve decides. Eve is the one who decides what's good and what's bad here. This is the first time we see, or at least the first time chronologically in the Bible, according to the books, according to the listing of the books. This is the first time we get the depiction of sin, deciding for yourself what is right and what is wrong. If we read Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, so when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. Eve has betrayed God's trust, and then she gives the fruit to Adam, and Adam proceeds to betray God's trust. So here, this is the first sin caused by humanity, at least. And it's kind of a pretty big deal, you know? God has given them basically everything that they need. They have shelter in the Garden of Eden. They have fruit. They have basically eternal fruit for days, years, you know. God gives them everything that they need. Also, hello to the 2 viewers. Have a nice day. God bless you. Thank you for joining the live stream. And basically, they have a bunch of animals. 3 viewers now, and there's basically a bunch of animals that they can take care of. It's peaceful. They have every single thing that they need, and we read in Genesis 3 that God even walks amongst them in the garden. And here we have Adam and Eve deciding, I'm not going to live the way God has instructed me to live. He's given me everything that I need, but I need more. Hello to the 4th viewer of this live stream. All of you, have a nice day. I hope you enjoy it. If you don't, don't say anything. Don't be rude. Don't be mean. Just leave. So basically, they betray God's trust. They say, we want more. We need more. What God has given us isn't enough. We're going to start deciding for ourselves what's good, what's bad. Now, actually, is my microphone on? I need to check for that because, okay, yeah, my microphone's on. So, basically, that is a pretty big betrayal, right? Imagine this from God's eyes. This is a thing that I did a lot in one of my recent preachings, where I would have you, the viewer, imagine the scene, but from the eyes of God. And we're going to be doing this again today. Imagine yourself as God. Also, hello to the 5th viewer who's watching this. Imagine yourself as God. You've created this perfect world, and you've created humans to rule for it. You live with them as a family. They are your children, and you trust them to follow your rules, follow your ways, and to live a peaceful, happy life. You give them everything that they need to survive. And then one day, you find out they have betrayed you. They have broken your trust, and they have decided to take matters into their own hands, and now they are desperately seeking to be wiser than you. It's like betraying a ruler, or rather, in a more realistic situation, it's like betraying a parent. That must have been very hard for God that must have been hard, because of course God is God, but he still feels emotions, as we see through Jesus in the New Testament. Jesus cries, he feels anger. Add that to the bloopers reel. He feels anger and he feels pain. And he's even capable of dying. Of course, this is all because he's in his human form. But even in the Old Testament, we see that God is able to feel a lot of anger. So just because, God is God, that doesn't mean God can't feel. That doesn't mean God doesn't have any feelings. God is just as human as we are. I mean, we are made in his image, after all. And imagine yourself. What would you do in that scenario? Like, you'd probably be pretty mad about it, right? You'd think to yourself, I've given these humans everything that they need, and they've betrayed me. I'm just going to destroy all of this and start a new world. But here's what God does. We're going to Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to read verse 21. Also for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin, and he clothed them. God, of course, he punishes them verses prior to this, cursing the serpent Adam and Eve. Because, of course, God's not going to let sin, he's not going to let people sin under his nose. But he still does 2 things. He doesn't kill them off immediately, which is what he basically promised to do. And he makes a promise to them about salvation. God, what is speculated to this point, what is speculated based off what the text tells us, God has sacrificed 2 animals, probably a couple sheep, maybe a cow, and God gives them tunics of animal skin. Instead of killing them off, God makes a sacrifice, killing off the animals instead of the humans. This is what we later come to know as a sacrifice. Isn't that just amazing? I mean, again, this must have been pretty tough on God. I mean, imagine being a parent. You give your children one specific rule that, if broken, can ruin your entire relationship with them. And they decide that they don't need you anymore. That's kind of the thing when you get older as a parent. I'm sure a lot of grandparents and just parents in general feel the pain of having a loved one, a loved member of the family who suddenly just leaves you to die, barely calls you, barely does anything, barely pays any sort of attention to you. That is how God felt at that very moment. But he still forgave them. Instead of killing them right on the spot, destroying the world, and starting all over again, he gave them a second chance. He even gave them a promise of salvation. And this is only the first of many examples about God's forgiveness in the Bible. There are many examples that I could give right now, but I kind of have a schedule, and the amount of time that I have left to talk about this is 40 to 30 minutes. So, gotta keep my schedule. So I'm only going to mention a couple. Now, this live stream is going to be very, very similar to one of my recent preachings, where I was talking about God's love and his mercy. This is kind of repetitive, but then again, you don't repeat anything, no one gets it stuck in their head. So, basically, the story of Noah and the ark. Humans have grown to sin a lot. They have become wicked. And even some of the angels have started to rebel. Now, of course, there was a rebellion earlier with Lucifer and all of the other angels. But here we have a second sort of rebellion, not so much for wisdom of their own and power, but for more, how do I put this, more sexual reasons. They come down to see the earthly woman, kind of weird in hindsight, but I guess this is another example of the children of God not seeing that what God has given them is enough. And the continuous sin that comes from that, the rebellion that comes from that. And basically, the Bible goes out of its way to say that Noah and his family are the only righteous people in the entire world, or at least, for the very least, Mesopotamia, which is a lot to say, because if we're saying that everyone in the entire world, except for Noah and his family of 6 people, is the only good amount of people in the world, that is saying a lot. And that must be kind of painful for God, again, because when people think of the flood story, they think of angry, they think of God being angry in this situation. And in the Old Testament, there's kind of this idea, this stereotypical idea. In the Old Testament, God is like this hothead that destroys people, for basically no reason. People even make jokes and memes about God killing more people than Satan himself. And then in the New Testament, it's all about Jesus and his love for people and, sharing love to others. That's how people kind of steer that. Welcome to English class. I need... Pardon my stutters. Believe it or not, despite me talking a lot about Christ on this, I have my stutters occasionally. Despite the that's kind of how people, that's kind of the stereotypes people have for the Old and New Testaments. But that could be, the complete opposite from the truth. God in this situation is not angry. He is instead saddened by the event. He is not mad. Instead, he is sad. Sad because his children have strayed away from him. They have betrayed him, thrown him away like garbage on the street. And God decides enough is enough. However, he still gives humanity another chance. One repeated thing that you will see if you read the Bible from beginning to end is God's repeated second chances. From Adam and Eve's sin, to Noah's Ark, to the sins of the people of Israel, all the way up to us and Jesus. God is this incredible being of love and forgiveness. And despite how almost the entire world, except for like this family of 8-9 people, have betrayed him, he could just wipe them all off of the earth. And that's what he would have done if it weren't for the righteousness of Noah. Noah was a correct man, a man who wasn't violent, a man who wasn't rude, a man who lived a life of good, according to what we know of him in Genesis. And God spares him for the simple fact that he is righteous, for the simple fact that he has faith. And so, God gives Noah the plan. Hey, basically, I'm going to wipe out everyone on Earth except for you and your family. Now, now imagine being Noah in this situation. God comes up to you, taps you on the shoulder, and tells you, "Hey, I'm going to destroy everyone else in this world with a flood, except for you and your family. Now build this humongous boat to spare your life." Now, that must have been crazy for Noah at the time, because he lived in a desert. Now, if I go to the internet and start searching up an image of ancient Mesopotamia, and you take a good look at it, it's not the most fertile place. Mesopotamia is a pretty dry place. There's only a couple of places where there's a lot of green. That would be around the two rivers of Mesopotamia, the two popular rivers, at least, near Mesopotamia, where Syria, Iraq, Euphrates, so where the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates are, and then you have the Nile River in Egypt, and that's basically it. Everything else, like Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all of that is a dry desert area. And God was telling Noah to build a boat there. Now, we don't know if Noah lived in a very fertile area, like maybe somewhere in like Syria or Iraq, or if he lived in a more desert area, kind of like the Jordan. However, we do know one thing, that people didn't really have an idea of what rain was at the moment. Now, for us, living in the present, that may sound pretty stupid. But if we go to Genesis, back to Genesis chapter 2, I know we're flying all around the Bible. So, also, you do not have an excuse for not following me with this. You can buy a Bible. If you don't want to buy a Bible, it's free on the internet. If you don't want to even be messed with religion, then why are you even here? So, In Genesis chapter 2, verse 6, I believe. Yes, verse 6. Verse 5 to 6. It tells us, quote, "Before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb of the field had grown, God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." So basically, a misty, watery sort of substance would go throughout the earth, and that's how everything would get watered. Now, imagine living in those times. It's just a very powerful mist that waters everything. And then suddenly, some like 500-year-old man starts walking around town with like his walking stick and starts yelling out in public, "Rain is going to start falling from the heavens." You'd think that'd be a little bit ridiculous, right? And for Noah, it must have been even more ridiculous because he was being told to build an entire boat in a dry desert area where rain wasn't even a thing. The idea of water coming from the sky was ridiculous. So ridiculous, in fact, that people in the ancient world thought there were windows in the sky where the water would come out of. Don't ask me, ask the buried corpses of the people from that time. So basically, Noah was put in this very unbelievable situation, but he still had faith. He went out of his way to construct an ark that, if I check right now, Noah's Ark was, in modern day terms, 510 feet long. Noah spent nearly, if his age is to be taken literally, he spent basically 100 years working, more than 100 years, working on this ark and nothing else. This is what made Noah to be considered righteous, that he went out of his way to trust in God. Despite it seeming unbelievable at the time, he went out of his way to believe and to trust in God. And Noah was considered a preacher as well. If I go here, 2 Peter 2:5, we read that Noah was a preacher of righteousness. He preached for, I believe, 120 years for the people. The people would ridicule him. They'd mock him. I mean, for them, the idea sounded completely absurd. And Noah was, then again, Noah was 500 years old, 500 plus years old at the time. Imagine in our terms, imagine some 60, 70-year-old man telling you the world is going to end. We probably wouldn't really believe it either. But Noah had so much faith, and he was so righteous that he never gave up. He never gave up on preaching, and he continued talking and talking and talking, sharing the word, and that's what made him righteous. God gave them 120 years to wait for this flood, yet they didn't believe. And so, God sent the flood, yet he still spared Noah and his family. Now, this is just two of the many examples that I could give about God's mercy and his forgiveness. But the greatest forgiveness of all would have to be Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Jesus is God. God in a human form. God in the flesh. God reincarnated as a human, if you will. God went out of his way to come down, humble himself on the earth, live his life as a poor carpenter, and at the age of 33, he sacrificed himself on that cross. Why, you may be asking to yourself? Why would God come to the earth just to sacrifice and throw away his own life, killing himself, basically? Couldn't he have sent angels to stop his death? Isn't this just a suicide? The reason why God did all of that was for you and for me. God made a promise back to Adam and Eve. He told them, one day, a descendant of yours is going to arrive, and he's going to sacrifice himself to destroy the serpent, the cause of all evil. And if I am correct, over 2,000 years after this promise, God fulfilled it. God came in human flesh and sacrificed his own life for me and for you. And it wasn't a painless death either. He died by crucifixion. His body was hung on top of a cross, and he sat there for what I believe to be 3 to 6 hours. His body hung on there, and it was a very shameful, very awful death. Crucifixion is a method of capital punishment in which the victim is tied or nailed to a large wooden cross or beam and left to hang until eventual death from exhaustion and asphyxiation. Damn it. And asphyxiation. So this was really a really painful death. And it wasn't a really well accepted death either. This was a very shameful, awful, painful death that Jesus suffered all for us. Despite all that we have done, we have betrayed his trust, taken things too far. So many large genocides that have been caused. People were murdered, lives were stolen, people left to burn, mothers having to eat their own children alive. Even the smallest of sins are, in the eyes of God, are just the same as these smaller ones. Telling a lie, stealing something. But God still came around to give us love and forgiveness. And that is the beauty of God's character. If I were to be asked what my favorite things in the Bible were, my favorite character, my favorite point, my favorite lesson that can be learned out of it, all of the answers would be God's character. God is a really kind of tragic character when you think about it. He has been betrayed. He has been basically used for people's own fortune nowadays. People, have you seen the TikToks of people who say, if you leave a like, you're not going to go to hell. Jesus is going to save you. What is a like? Okay, I'm going to do a side rant here for a second. How is liking some 10-year-old's video going to save you from hell? I don't know. And people fall for that. That's how little people know about the Bible and about God's forgiveness and his love. But the beautiful thing is that despite how we use God as a prophet for our own good, how we steal, rob from others, how we steal their items and sometimes steal their lives, how many innocent people we put to rest for our own well-being, how vengeful we are, how thirsty we are for blood. Despite all of that, God still loves us. He has given us forgiveness time and time again, and that is what makes me love God's character so much. It is beautiful. God as a character and the story of God as presented to us by the Bible is beautiful. And I hope that what I've talked about today can help you see the same way. Even if you're not Christian, you must admit that the story of God as seen in the Bible is a beautiful, lovely story. If you don't want to, don't do it. I'm not forcing anyone to read the Bible. If you don't want to, that's your choice. But if you have some spare time, if you decide to do it, if it's not for believing in Christ, read the Bible to see how great of a character God is, how lovely as a character God is, and how beautiful this story of love and of a family truly is. It's not a book of rules. It's not just some angry, wild God giving judgments to people. It's a story of love and of a family. And this is why I love God's character so much. This is one of the multiple reasons why I love the character of God so much. I might make an entire preaching based off of why I really love the character of God, considering how many times I've talked about it, but that might take a while. If you're interested in seeing that, stay tuned. But for now, this is all that I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. To the people who stuck around, to the people who are still watching, the two of you who are still watching, the one of you who are still watching now, I give you thanks. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for watching this, and may you have a good day, good morning, good afternoon, a good night, or whatever time it is where you are. God bless you, and have a nice